Well, good evening, everyone. Noswaith dda. Nice to see everyone this evening. We're into December now, the season of goodwill and cheer. And I'm sure those are two sentiments that we extend to our guest this evening, Hugh Morris, who currently is the Chief Executive Officer of Glamorgan County Cricket Club, one of our most distinguished players, one of our most distinguished administrators as well. And Hugh will be hanging up his bat, hanging up his bowling boots. Not that Hugh did much bowling, of course, during his illustrious career. And Hugh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. We all know that you're undergoing treatment at the moment, and it's a pleasure to see you this evening, Hugh.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good evening, everybody, and a very Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you. We're gonna go through your career. I've got lots and lots of questions, I'm glad to say. Many people have submitted questions. We've got probably twice as many people again who can't join us this evening, or maybe attending Christmas parties or family gatherings. But we've got lots of questions, so we're gonna skim through your illustrious career. We're gonna start off, and the first question that I've been asked by a lady called Sue is, why cricket? Why did you take up cricket in the first place, Hugh?
Yeah, look, I love all sports, so people who know me well know that. I guess, you know, I came from a very sporting family. My father played a lot of cricket, played a lot of rugby, as did my brother. And I guess growing up in Cowbridge, I went to Clanbar Primary School, played a bit of sport there, and then went down to Blundell's after a year at Cowbridge Comprehensive. But, you know, I think cricket always had a fascination for me. I think it's fair to say up until about the age of 15, probably rugby was my top sport. Loved my rugby, played a lot of rugby, played rugby till I was 21. Really enjoyed that. But I guess I played a lot of other sports as well. I played squash. But cricket was always the one that really fascinated me, I guess, from about the age of 14, 15, 16 onwards. You know, as things started to go well for me, and I guess that the ball, you know, started rolling from there, really. But, you know, I'd always had a real interest in it. Started watching Glamorgan, the Sapphire Gardens, from the age of kind of 5 or 6. So whilst I was a kind of all-rounder at sport, cricket was, you know, eventually became definitely my number one.
Were there any direct family links with the game? I gather your father, Roger, was a decent batter with Cowbridge.
Yeah, he played for Cowbridge. Yeah, and you know, played for a long time for them. You know, Cowbridge at the time. John Davis, who played the game for Glamorgan, was part of the Cowbridge setup there. And I always remember dearly departed Jeff Bird, who was a long-standing committee member of Glamorgan. Jeff and I kind of started together on the boundary of Cowbridge Greek Club. So yeah, that's where it all started for me. And then I moved to Cardiff Creek Club when I was about, because Cowbridge didn't have a junior section at the time, whereas Cardiff Creek Club did. And I moved to Cardiff when I was about 12, and you know, they had a really good junior section and a very good team, and you know, became part of that when I went down to Blundell School.
Yeah, you and I was fortunate enough to work at Blundell's. You were a pupil there, and I know that the thing that really impressed me right from my early days of working there was the coaching and the fact that you had really, really good pitches, the coaching across all sports, but in particular big field at Blundell's, which for those people on the call who don't know, it's Tiverton on the main road heading south towards Exeter, and this big main road goes through, and on either side, on one side is a whole suite of rugby pitches, and on the other side, big field, which is the main cricket ground, lovely old pavilion. And what did it mean to you, Hugh, to go there, having been brought up, okay, Cowbridge, a very good club, Cardiff, a very good club, but to suddenly go away from home to a public school in Devon and to play in those facilities?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was a great opportunity for me. It was, you know, it was pretty daunting to start with. I went away when I was 12, 13 years of age. and spending time away from home at that age is pretty daunting. But I soon settled into life there. It was an amazing sports school. I mean, it was only 450 pupils when I was there at the time. But as you say, the sports facilities were fantastic, particularly rugby and cricket, which I pretty much played all the time, and probably played a bit too much, and neglected my work a little bit. But it was a fantastic opportunity for me. And I think the three ingredients there was, as you say, we had some really good cricket coaches and sports coaches generally. We had some fantastic facilities. And I guess more than anything else, we spent time, playing cricket, practicing cricket. Literally Monday afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, we played all day. Thursday we practiced, Friday we practiced, and we played all day Saturday as well. So I was getting hours and hours and hours of cricket under my belt, which at that stage was absolutely fundamental on really good surfaces, and being helped by some really good coaches.
And when you came back home to South Wales, you were very fortunate to have in the coaching setup at the time in the late 1970s, as far as Glamorgan was concerned, within the second 11 and within the junior colts, Phil Clift, Kevin Lyons, Alan Jones coming towards the end of his career. And there was another gentleman called Tom Cartwright, who, of course, had a fantastic career with Warwickshire, with England, with Somerset, had a season with Glamorgan in 1977 when we got through to the final of the Gillette Cup, and then became coaching organiser for Wales. So those four gentlemen must have had a huge impact on you, Hugh.
Yeah, I mean, my coach at that stage was absolutely Tom Cartwright. He was, I mean, technically a fantastic coach, helped me massively. I'm really indebted to Tom throughout my career, really. Whenever anything started to go wrong with my game, later on when I was a professional, I would always go back to Tom Cartwright, and he and I would be in a Neath Indoor School trying to sort things out together. So, I'm hugely indebted to Tom. I think he was a fantastic technical coach. And, as far as a mentor was concerned, I couldn't have had a better mentor than Alan Jones. And, when I used to go down as a young lad to pre-season training in the Neath Indoor School, Tom Cartwright just didn't allow me to bowl at all. He just stuck me at the end of a net and said, right, watch Alan Jones bat. So between them, Tom as a coach and Alan as a mentor, I couldn't have had a better start in my career.
And you made your debut. I think I was working out, it must be now 45 years ago. Seems like yesterday, though. You made your Glamorgan second 11 debut during the summer of 1979. You were still at Blundell's in the upper fifth, doing your, of course, in those days, it was O-levels, not GCSEs. What was it like then for you to make your second 11 debut and to be surrounded by professional cricketers?
Yeah, again, pretty daunting. I mean, I think it was 15 or 16 at the time. And, I had a reasonably successful time down at Blundell's and scored a lot of runs down there. But this was a completely different kettle of fish, a real step up. I remember playing some of my early games in the second team with the likes of John Hopkins and Arthur Francis and Alan Lewis Jones. People who'd been around the block a little bit and seasoned professionals, and I'm playing against seasoned professionals. So I remember some early games, playing an early game at Pontedillice against Northampton, might have been my first game actually, Northampton second 11 at Pontedillice. Played against Warwickshire down there as well. They had a very strong side at the time. So it was a great experience, but very different from playing on the public school circuit, that's for sure.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been so many half volleys, or the wickets would have been a little bit flatter at Blundell's. I know the outstanding groundsman professional there would produce some shirt front wickets, and I know that when I was from my own point of view, I was just starting out scoring and working on Radio Wales, and I know quite a few people said, God, just look at Hugh's footwork. He's been brought up on good pitches, and it was your technique. And then I know in terms of your first class career, then the summer of 1981, of course, though a summer when Javed Miandad hit the headlines, Rodney Ontong as well, Glamorgan, we had Ezra Mosley, Fast West Indian, sadly, who picked up a stress fracture in his back. But the word on the street was that there was the very promising, very gutsy left-handed batter. And in the championship match against Leicestershire at Sophia Gardens in 1981, H. Morris batting, I think, at number 6 or number 7 in the order, if I'm right, making your debut, Hugh, against a Leicestershire attack that actually boasted quite a decent number of internationals. It wasn't a gentle introduction, was it?
It definitely wasn't a gentle introduction. My very first ball in first class cricket came from Andy Roberts, the much feared West Indian fast bowler. So I remember, again, I talk about a step up from Blundell's school to Glamorgan second 11. From second 11 to first 11 at that stage was a massive step up for me. I was 17 years of age. And obviously really excited to make my debut. But I remember walking out, taking my guard, and looking back. And Mike Garnham was the wicket keeper at Leicestershire, and he was just miles back. And the very first ball, thankfully, Andy Roberts bowled a wideish one that I could leave. But right from the first ball, you knew it was a massive step up in terms of pace, nerves. It was a completely different ball game. So. Yeah, it was a great experience, and I think my claim to fame in that game, I think I got 16 in the first innings and 5 in the second or something. But I remember in the second innings, I got caught by David Gower, bowled Andy Roberts, so that was a pretty good start to my career.
Yeah, and Andy Roberts, still a fearsome bowler. Of course, in those days, the county second 11s would have had international or aspiring international players. Just thinking of the Leicestershire attack, I think there was a chap called George Ferris as well, who was doing the round of second 11 matches. So not only were you having first team experience, you were playing, Hugh, in county second 11, which of course these days there aren't so many. Obviously the game has changed. There weren't so many aspiring international bowlers or bowlers with international experience in second team cricket.
No, look, I mean, the world's changed a lot since then. And as you say, I mean, the likes of Anthony Gray, a West Indian fast bowler, who's a very, very good bowler. George Ferris, you mentioned. Tony Merritt played for Warwickshire. Also, I was fortunate enough at that particular time to be playing for England under 19s. And you mentioned George Ferris. He was in that West Indian under 19 side, as was Courtney Walsh, as was Roger Harper and Phil Simmons and David Williams. And then the following year we played against Australia, who had Craig McDermott. So it was a very high quality fast bowling attack that we had at that particular time that we were facing.
And you were fortunate enough in 1982 and again in 1983 to be asked to captain the young England team. Had you captained teams at Blundell's all the way through?
Yeah, I've been fortunate. I'd captained the Blundell's team for quite a few years, so I was used to that, and I'd played for the England schools as well, and I was lucky enough to captain that team as well. And a lot of the players from that team, Neil Fairer was in it, Andy Pick, the Nottinghamshire seam bowler, was in it, Pete Moores, the Sussex wicketkeeper, was in it. So we'd actually kind of grown up together. So we played for the schools team together, then we played for the Young England team together against, as you say, West Indies and Australia, which was a great thrill for us all.
And that then led a couple of years later to your maiden first class 100 against Yorkshire. I seem to remember at Sophia Gardens. If I'm right in thinking it was 114 not out or something like that. And what did it mean to you, Hugh, to actually get 100 under your belt?
Yeah, it was a really important milestone for me, that, because I think when you start to score hundreds, it almost feels like, blimey, I can play and succeed at this level, and oftentimes the first 100 or the second 100 are the hardest to score. So that was a real milestone, and particularly against Yorkshire as well, who are they're always a strong side, Yorkshire, as we always know. I remember that game actually. Jeff Boycott came up and shaking my hand at the end of it. So he hasn't shaken my hand much since then, right? But he in fairness to him, he came up and congratulated me, which was very nice.
So which other batters were in the Glamorgan side at that stage? Alan Jones, having retired in 1983, You mentioned John Hopkins, Alan Lewis-Jones, I think, would have been there.
Yeah.
Jarvid?
No, no, Javid wasn't there. I think Eunice Armand came to us the following year. I think it was. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, Javid would have been around then. Yes, sorry, Javid would have been around then. And Rodney Onton was obviously around. Mike Selby had come across from Middlesex to captain the side as well. So yeah, we had a pretty experienced side at that particular stage.
And your college friends, in particular, Greg Thomas, because again, we've glossed over the fact that you were a student at what was then South Glamorgan Institute, or the old Cardiff College of Education, of course, nowadays Cardiff Met. And you were doing, I think, a degree in human movement studies, I think, if
I think
I've
that's
got
what
the
they
word.
called it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, I mean,
Yeah.
it was. I would remember at the end of. I remember my time at Blundell's when I was 18. Wolf Wooler, who was very much still in charge of Glamorgan at the time, asking me if I would be signing a contract with Glamorgan. And I said, no, I'm going to go to university. And Wolf wasn't happy about that at all. But I did. And for a few reasons, I wanted to get a degree behind me. You know, in those days, cricket wasn't particularly well paid. I wanted to get a degree behind me to make sure that I had something to fall back on. And also, I wanted to continue to play rugby. And I was very fortunate in going to South Glam Institute, or Cardiff Met as it is now, to play really high quality rugby. We played, first class rugby pretty much every week against the likes of Swansea, Cardiff, Neath, Pontypool, etc. That allowed me to extend my rugby career, which was fantastic, and I don't regret it for 1 minute.
And you also played some club rugby as well, didn't you? I think you had a spell with Aberavon.
Yeah. I played a few games for Aberavon, which I really enjoyed, and I was really lucky to play for the Wales under-20 side against France as well, down at St Helens actually.
And what position, Hugh? Scrum half or fly half?
I played outside half, so
Okay.
no, number 10 I was.
So you could have been. So Gareth Davis in the Welsh lineup. Did you fancy yourself as possibly the next Phil Bennett or Barry John? Or
Oh, I fancied myself. I was never ever going to do it. But no, I was. It was great that the Welsh under-20 side that played against France. Actually, in that squad we had Robert Jones was my scrum half. Paul Thorburn was in the squad. Ian Evans was in the squad. Kevin Hopkins, who played some games for Swansea and Wales as well. So it was a great experience, and to play down at St Helens as well was obviously a ground that I knew very well.
indeed, but your rugby career, am I right in thinking you sustained a few knee injuries and you had to give up the oval shaped ball for the small hard piece of leather coming at you at 90 miles an hour from West Indian fast bowlers?
Yeah, and I was never going to play much beyond the age of 21 for rugby, that's for sure. And so yeah, that was pretty much the end of my rugby career when I left university.
Well, in the mid 1980s, Glamorgan, I think it's fair to say you mentioned Wilf Wooler. Glamorgan in the 1980s, the phrase that Wilf often used in the yearbook was, when he was reviewing the season, was, "It's another season where we are rebuilding." And I think he used that phrase in 1980, 1981, 1982, so on. But being serious, in 1986, Rodney Ontong, who'd taken over from Mike Selvey, Rodney Ontong decided to step down from the captaincy. I can still vividly remember hearing the news that Rodney was standing down at, I think Glamorgan were playing Gloucestershire at Bristol. And the following day, I seem to remember Glamorgan were then playing at Grace Road against Leicestershire. And leading the team out that day as the youngest ever appointed captain was a certain H. Morris. A great personal achievement for you, Hugh, but it was quite a difficult time for the club, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, it was a very difficult time for the club, and it all happened in a bit of a whirlwind, as you said. It happened. Rodney basically halfway through the season decided to jack in the captaincy role. And I remember I was offered it, as you say, that afternoon in Bristol, and we were playing the next day, kind of thing. So I had no time at all to kind of reflect or think about it or whatever. And to be honest with you, if I had my time over again, I wouldn't have done it at that particular time. I was really ambitious. I wanted the Glamorgan captaincy. I wanted to lead Glamorgan. It was my county. I'd been a reasonably experienced captain up until then, although I was only 22. But I didn't really know my game as well as I needed to. And there's no doubt that for 3 years, and the 3 years that I did it then, my game went backwards. I was worrying, concentrating more on other things than my game. And that wasn't good for me, and it certainly wasn't good for the club. So yeah, and it was tough. We were struggling in the championship. We didn't have a particularly competitive side at that particular stage. So if I'd have had my time over again, I wouldn't have done it at that stage.
Yeah. By then, of course, Hugh, you'd moved up the order. I said about 1981 when in your debut, slotting in at 6 or 7, but you had moved up the order, and with Alan Jones having retired in '83, who were your opening partners at that time?
Yeah, I mean, up until that stage, I'd always batted at 3. To be honest with you, I always batted number 3 throughout my whole career. So, and then obviously with Alan leaving, then I slotted into that role. But a number of different people, probably mostly with John Hopkins, certainly a little bit with Alan Lewis Jones, and I'm sure there were a few of us along the way as well. But it was mainly with Ponty and Alan Lewis.
Yeah, and we mustn't forget, of course, back in the mid 1980s, county cricket was very different. We had 3-day cricket, playing on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, jumping into cars, heading off for a game that starts on a Saturday. And then, of course, there was the Sunday League on the Sunday. And I can remember once we had a game at Swansea. I think it was against Oxford or Cambridge University. And on the Sunday, there was a Sunday League game against Yorkshire at Hull. So the Saturday night, getting in at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock on Sunday morning, going out playing a one-day game, jumping back in the cars and heading back to Swansea, starting all over again on Monday. So, Hugh, what are your recollections of the county caravan, for want of a better phrase, then in the 1980s? You've seen in your role with ECB, obviously changes to 4-day cricket, having one-day cricket not overlapping with the championship. But back then, how hard was it as an aspiring player with that schedule that you were faced?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it was relentless. I think at that stage we were playing either 22 or 24 3-day games. 4-day cricket hadn't quite come in that then. Did you say in the sandwich in the middle of it all was a Sunday league game, and it could be 300 miles away. I mean, the schedules were completely and utterly bonkers. And by the grace of God, no one was killed at 2 o'clock on the motorway. We had a really bad accident, or Rodney Huntag had a really bad accident travelling from. We played a game in Colchester, I think it was.
Yeah, yeah.
We were travelling from Colchester to Northampton, and Rod overtook a lorry. Lorry pulled out. And Rod's car hit the central reservation, turned over with him and Steve Barwick in it, and they ended up upside down on the other side of the road. Thank God they didn't hit anything else. But I mean, that Rodney suffered a really bad knee injury because of it. But I mean, it could have been far, far worse. So the schedule's just ridiculous.
And in terms of quality coming through, obviously now the system that we've got with 4-day cricket, much better, proper practice, proper preparation, but also proper rest. I know back in the 80s and the 90s, when I was fortunate enough to go in as a young scorer with bowling figures, going to the changing room, and often there'd be people fast asleep in a corner just catching up on their sleep.
Yeah, and look, I mean, the schedule is really difficult. I mean, what we're really good at doing in cricket is organising cricket matches. What we're not necessarily great at doing is preparing to play in them. And you look at other sports and the amount of time that they practice and train for the matches that they play in. Whereas certainly domestic cricket, it's very difficult to do that. you know, right up until this day, really. So, you know, get it, but it's a really difficult balance. Getting the right balance between the amount that you play, the amount that you train and prepare, and the amount you rest is the holy grail. And you know, I'm not sure that that we got it right yet.
Yeah, let's move on to another year, an annus mirabilis for you, Hugh, which was in 1990. I know there may be some people say that that year the seams on the balls were at an all-time low. But having said that, the summer of 1990, 2,276 runs and 10 hundreds. I have to say there are some records that the late and the great Don Shepherd produced as a bowler, and obviously Alan Jones you mentioned with 34,000 first-class runs for Glamorgan, scoring over 1,000 for 20 odd consecutive seasons. But in more recent times, your record then of 1990, 2,276 runs. What are your memories of that wonderful summer?
Yeah, very pleasant ones. It was, I mean, firstly, I think we were blessed with some really nice weather pretty much the whole of the summer. That led to some good pitches. And as you say, the seams on the balls were reduced that particular summer as well. So it was a bit of a perfect storm for us batters, really. At that stage as well, I was opening the batting with Alan Butcher. He'd come down from Surrey. And you know, he in his time at Glamorgan, you know, he was outstanding as a batter. And I think he and I, you know, it was very kind of healthy competition between us, really, or with us, because despite the fact that we were left-handers, Alan's strength, he was brilliant cutter of the ball, played the short ball really well, particularly outside the off stump. Whereas I was more kind of noodling off my legs and trying to squirt it through the covers, kind of thing. So you know, I think our games complemented one another, and I think we just kind of built a good rapport together, really, as an opening pair. And you know, it just went extremely well. I was lucky. I had a really good start to the summer, and I guess the key as a batter is not just starting the season well, but just continuing and keeping a good run going for as long as you possibly can. And you know, for the first and only time in my career, I was able to do that in 1990.
I know a lot of people were quite rightly pushing your name forward for England. Let's not forget that by that time, Matthew Maynard had made his England debut in 1988. We'd seen Steve Watkin come close. We'd already seen Greg Thomas make it into the England team. So the joke about the England selectors not having a map, having gone over the Severn Bridge, that was rather out of date. But at the end of the summer of 1990, you were appointed captain of the England A team. I think it was to the West Indies. And if I'm right in saying you had a couple of other Glamorgan youngsters in your tour party.
Yeah, yeah, that was Steve Watkin was on that tour, and Robert Croft was on the tour as well. And it was it was really challenging. I think it was 91, 92, because I think I made my debut against West Indies in 91 for England, and then I didn't get on the tour, but I captained them to captain the A team to the Caribbean, and yeah, I mean that was a full-on tour as well. I mean, typically Courtney Walsh somehow didn't make the West Indies senior side, so he was the captain of the West Indies A side. They had Courtney Walsh. They had a guy called Lyndon Joseph, who was as quick as most people I'd ever faced, that didn't really go on. Otis Gibson as well. Otis, first time we came across Otis was in that series. So it was full on. They had Jimmy Adams played. It was a really competitive series.
And weren't you called up to Australia as well for as cover during that period?
Yeah, 1990, 91, Graham Gooch got a nasty injury to his hand, and I went down to Australia for 8 weeks altogether to cover for him. which was fantastic experience. Unfortunately, we didn't do well in the Test series, and losing in Australia is not a great place to be at that particular stage. But yeah, we it was a good experience. I only played two up-country games. I played against the Bradman 11, and I played against the Australian Cricket Academy as well.
But then 1991, West Indies now touring, the full West Indies team touring England, and you're called up to make your England Test debut. You had two Test match appearances against the West Indies, another one at Lord's in August against Sri Lanka. How proud were you then to actually don the three lions at long last?
Yeah, obviously, one of the proudest moments of my career. Obviously, it's something that I'd always wanted to do, and it kind of eluded me until the age of 25, 26. So I've been around county cricket quite a lot, and I played against all of the West Indian fast bowlers at that stage as well. But stepping onto the international stage to play against the bowling attack of Ambrose, Walsh, Patterson, and Marshall was, again, I talk about step ups. That's the biggest one I've ever had, and particularly at the Oval when Patrick Patterson bowled the quickest spell I've ever faced from anybody by a country mile. He was a fierce and fast bowler. But a wonderful experience, and we won that final Test match at the Oval to draw the series 2-2, which was the first time an England side had drawn a series against West Indies for 20, 25 years. So it was a great experience.
Yeah, and you shared I believe, a century partnership opening the batting with Graham Gooch. There is a photo of you, both feet in the air, fending off an absolute snorter from one of the one of the West Indies fast bowlers. Did they have a spinner at the time? Did you get much spin?
If they did, they've never found out. They didn't need to. They with those four, it was literally they bowled for an hour each, and then they swapped over, and that was it. No, I think the closest thing they got to a spinner was Viv, but he never had the ball in his hand.
No, no. Well, let's move on to the summer of 1993. You're back in charge of Glamorgan, and a summer where amongst the priorities, I know it was a summer when Glamorgan made progress in other competitions, but one of the targets, I think I'm right in saying, was the Sunday League. The competition was 50 overs, and the coloured clothing had come in. So the blue and the yellow shirts that we all know and love so dearly. Am I right in thinking that there was a pre-season tour and there was a lot of strategic planning going on?
Yeah, we did. Well, I mean, we plan ahead of every season, obviously, but I mean, I think particularly that summer, we knew we had a good side. I mean, of that side in 1993, we had five guys who either played for or went on to play for England. We had two played for England A, and we had Viv in the side as well. So we knew we had a good side, and it was just trying to fit all those pieces of the jigsaw together properly, and that was the planning that we did. We were pretty regimented in what we did, so we had a very, very clear plan A. Everybody knew where they were going to field. Everybody knew where they were going to bowl, give or take. Everybody knew where they were going to bat. So I think there was real clarity in what our roles were and our responsibilities were. But you can have the best plans in the world if people don't execute them or not good enough to execute them, then they're not going to work. But that summer it really clicked and everybody stepped up to the mark, and it was a fantastic team effort.
A lot of people have reflected, myself included, on the fact that squad, the bulk of which had come through the Welsh schools, the Glamorgan cult system, there was something special, everyone all peaking, all maturing at just that time. And to have Viv Richards in the team, wow, what a great player. What was it like to captain Viv?
Yeah, look, I mean, he was fantastic. I'm a really good personal friend with Viv. He's just a fantastic human being, and you know, one of the best cricketers that's ever graced a cricket field. Um, as I said, we had, and I think it's really important, and that's what we've been trying to do over a period of time with Glamorgan, is to get a talent program in place that we're responsible for, and bring on the core team that are developed locally. And then if you do have any gaps in your side, then you try and fill them with outstanding people from outside, and particularly an overseas player. And that's exactly what happened with Viv. We knew we had a talented side, as we said. We knew we had a lot of international players in it, but Viv added some real stardust to us. You know, he'd achieved anything that anybody could have ever achieved in the game. He was an absolute natural born winner, and to get us over the line, his impact in the dressing room was really, really important to us.
And there was also another very, very decent acquisition from Somerset, Roland Lefebvre.
Yeah, Roland joined us. He was one bowler that, and he wasn't particularly quick, but he always hit the bat a little bit harder than you expected it to. But whenever I faced him, I always struggled to score runs off him. I was always impressed with him as a guy, as a fielder. He had a really good pair of hands, and he really played an important part in our squad there. And you know, Colin Metson was able to stand up to him. Metson stood up to Steve Barwick as well. People couldn't leave their crease. They got suffocated by our bowling attack. I mean, you know, we had Steve Watkin, Robert Croft, Roland Lefebvre, Steve Barwick. You know, it was one of the most accurate bowling attacks you could ever wish to have. So there was a really good recipe to restrict teams, you know, whoever we played against.
And Adrian Dale was also very talented all-rounder, worth his place in the side for his batting and his bowling, giving the glue and allowing us to have maybe a specialist bowler. I know these days you have to be three-dimensional with your play, but there's someone else we've mentioned earlier, but someone else who blossomed under Viv as a batter, and that's Matt Maynard. Reflecting on Matt's batting career, and again in 1993, to watch Maynard and Richards in full flow, that must have given you great pleasure as a captain.
Oh, look, Matt's one of the most outstanding players that I've had the fortune to play with. There's no doubt about that. Hugely talented, really confident in his ability. We saw that from the very first game he played against Yorkshire when he scored 100 on his debut down at St Helens. And he never looked back from there. Yeah, an absolutely outstanding batter who was also an outstanding fielder. I mean, you know, whichever position you put him, when he was standing at second slip, he hardly dropped the ball. And wherever he fielded in the field, he would save your runs or run somebody out. So you know, he was hugely influential in, you know, well, he's been hugely influential in Glamorgan cricket for decades now.
Would you say he was the most gifted batter you played with?
Oh, certainly one of the most gifted batters I played with. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've been very fortunate to play with him against some really good players. But yeah, Matt would be up there as far as pure talent is concerned.
And then on the spin bowling, as you mentioned, Robert Croft on the verge of an international career, and a hungry Robert Croft must have been fantastic to have the the very wily Croft, because I always felt watching him, he had a very wise head on his young shoulders, and I think he came into the side way back in 1989 with not much in the way of second team experience, but slotted straight in and could do so much.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we were all hugely, you know, disappointed for Rodney Monton when he had to give up because of injury. But it paved the way for Crofty to play from an early age, and you know, again, he was very accurate with his bowling. You know, he was actually a mature off spinner right from the word go, as you kind of alluded to there. So you know, he fitted into things. He was confident, and he plugged the gap that we thought was going to be a huge one when Rodney left.
And to have Don Shepherd, who I mentioned earlier on, to have Don going around the country in his guise as summariser, commentator for BBC Radio Wales, but also having Don on call just to have a word in Crofty's ear, that must have been wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, just like Alan Jones was a mentor to me in my early days. Don was very well. He was there all the time, Don, as you said. So he was on hand to have a beer with Crofty, talk to him in the evenings, talk through his game. So again, a hugely influential ex-Glamorgan player, helping a young lad find his feet in the game.
Let's look back at the '93 season. A lot of people, obviously, and quite rightly, focus on a sunlit evening in Canterbury when Tony Cottee hit the ball straight for four. I know it went over the wicketkeeper's head, but let's not spoil the story. But that summer of 1993, Glamorgan also had a very good run in the Gillette Cup, or the NatWest Trophy as it was then, and also in the Championship. There was a remarkable game at Cardiff, I remember, where Glamorgan scored over 500 runs against Middlesex, and Glamorgan in all three major competitions were cutting the mustard that summer.
Yeah, we were, and that's actually quite unusual for a club to be able to compete in all of the domestic competitions in the same year is actually quite unusual. But I think one thing we were definitely helped by as well is that we hardly had any injuries. I think the whole of the summer we played 13 players in the whole of that summer. So again, we were very, very used to our roles and responsibilities, what we had to do. Everybody was in pretty good form and very confident, and that was a good recipe for success.
I can remember we went down to Hove to play a semi-final against Sussex in the NatWest Trophy. A lot of people were then saying, "Oh, Viv's going to sign off his career with an appearance in a Lord's final." And for a lot of that game, it did look as if it was going our way. Then there was a stand between, I think it was Neil Lennon and Keith Greenfield, if my memory serves me right. Things didn't quite go according to plan in that last quarter of the game. And I can remember seeing the look on everyone's face. Do you think that made us even more hungry after losing to Sussex? So determined that we wanted to achieve something that summer. Was that a turning point, or?
No, look, I mean, that was the semi-final. It was towards the end of August, and we were going really well anyway. So I don't think it was a turning point. But what I do remember from that game, which I remember really well, I was absolutely gutted to lose that. That was one of the biggest disappointments, I've got to say. I think we struggled to get to about 220 odd, but we got Sussex. I think it was about 120 odd for seven, and we were right in the box seats. And I will always remember Alan Wells. I think got 100 in that game. Played really, really well, and he was a very fine player. And he was obviously the wicket that we wanted. And I swear to this day, we ran him out by a yard and a half, and he was given not out, and he went on to win the game for them. I was mortified because it was a game for us to win. I think the one black spot of my Glamorgan career was that I never played in the Lord's final. Would have loved to have done that and got close. I think I played 4 semi-finals, but that was the closest we got, and we really should have won it.
And it was, I think, the following year when the replays were brought in to help the umpires adjudicate. But we're not bitter, because come September, I know we had a rain-affected game. I think it was against Essex at Cardiff. And as the fixture schedule had it, it was then down to Canterbury, the St Lawrence ground. Winner takes all. What are your memories of that sunlit evening, or that sunlit day in Canterbury, when you led Glamorgan to their first ever one-day silverware?
My first abiding memory was panicking about getting to the ground on time because there was so many people trying to get in the ground that I didn't think it was going to get in. I was last in our changing room. Most of the players are out on the pitch at the time, beginning their warm up. And I rushed to my peg in the middle of the change room. And the only other person in the change room was dear old Don Shepherd. And I said to Don, I said, morning, Don, morning, Don. And he said, his only words to me was, we never win down here. I thought, Chef, that's not what I want to hear at the moment. But so yeah, it was a bit of a panic to start with. But we we obviously bowled first against them, and they got 200, I think, in a 50 over game, which we were really pleased with on a pretty decent pitch. And you know, we had a strong batting lineup. Viv was playing. We all knew it was going to be his last game. We all wanted it to be, you know, a victorious swan song for him. You know, we had a couple of bumps along the way, but it was fitting that Viv was there right at the end. I was really lucky actually to be standing in the middle when he walked out to bat, and it really did make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I mean, literally everybody in the St Lawrence ground was on their feet, applauding, cheering him. It was yeah, it was an amazing moment. You know, thankfully that, you know, in the end, he and Ian Cott saw us over the line.
Yeah, I can remember the there was something theatrical because Viv never rushed to the wicket. There was that pause. I'm not saying he should have been timed out, Angelo Matthews, but no, no, no. But he walked in wearing his cap, of course, never wore a helmet, chewing gum, almost like the gunslinger coming out at the OK Corral. And Kent had quite a slippery Anglo-Australian fast bowler called Duncan Spencer. And there was a moment when I think a lot of people thought that Spencer had got Viv out, but the umpire, David Constant, if my memory serves me right, called no ball.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, literally, I was at the other end when that happened. Duncan Spencer was extremely slippery. That was the only time I ever played against him. He didn't play a lot of cricket. He sadly he had a lot of back injuries. Played for Western Australia. Came over to Kent that summer. We'd heard a bit about him and done a bit of kind of history on him. Looked at videos and whatever. But he was. I mean, he was only about 5'5", but he was really sharp. And he bounced Viv early on, and Viv went to hook him, and he spliced it to mid on and got caught at mid on. But as you say, thankfully it was a no ball.
Will the celebrations went on long into the night? I know the pub that used to be opposite the ground there, the Bat and Ball, full of very happy Welsh folk. The Max Boyce catalogue of songs ringing out. A wonderful, wonderful evening. And 4 years later, those joyous Celtic celebrations were repeated in the West Country at Taunton. Now, 1997, Hugh, was your final year as a professional player. It had started in rather, unfortunate circumstances against Warwickshire at Sophia Gardens. I say unfortunate because you did have 233 runs to your credit, but you talked about slippery, nasty fast bowlers. A certain A. Donald struck you, and you had to retire hurt. I have done my homework, and I believe it's one of the highest ever scores anyone's ever made to retire hurt on. But let's look at that start to 1997. Duncan Fletcher now as Glamorgan coach. Waqar Younis, the great the great Pakistani fast bowler. And the season starts in fantastic fashion with you notching up a double hundred. Did you feel there was something special right from the start?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, Viv we had as a superstar in '93, and Waqar we had in 1997, and Viv filled a certain hole in 1993, and Waqar filled a hole he needed filling in 1997. I mean, he was a supreme fast bowler. Great action, he could swing the ball conventionally early on, and obviously brilliant with the reverse swing later on. And it was funny. He gave us a different kind of confidence. I mean, we knew we had a strong batting lineup. We knew we had a bowling lineup that would be very competitive, spearheaded by Steve Watkin and Robert Croft. But Wacker gave us an edge. Whatever we scored, we always fancied defending. And I've never been in a Glamorgan side that really felt like that. He bowled in halfway through that season. I remember playing against Lancashire at Aigburth, and in a horribly rain-affected game, and we set them a target of 200 in about 50 overs, which was incredibly generous on behalf of Matthew. But Wacker got 7 for 13. Oh, sorry, so 7 for 21 in that game, and just blew them away. I mean, he just was absolutely outstanding. The very next day, then we played against Sussex down at Swansea, and we lost the toss. We were asked to bowl, and he got 8 for 15 in that game. So he got 21 wickets for about 40 runs in 2 days, which gave us a real momentum halfway through the season.
And Glamorgan as well did really well in the one-day competition as well. Again, echoes of 1993. And Glamorgan did so well again, another semi-final in the one-day knockout tournament, this time against Essex. Let's not dwell on an incident with Mark Eilert in the twilight. Let's not dwell too much on Darren Thomas's delivery to Peter Such on the reserve day. But I can remember the support that Glamorgan had in 1997. People there turning up, sensing that something special was going to happen. And let's just, before we talk about Taunton and your final game, let's just talk about the role of outgrounds, because 1997, again in 1993, that support base was there. And Glamorgan, 1993, again in 1997, going around the outgrounds, representing Wales. How important was that, Hugh?
Yeah, look, all of us who've grown up supporting Glamorgan and eventually playing for Glamorgan are really aware that we're not just representing a county, we're representing a country. And I've always really enjoyed playing at outgrounds. Abergavenny, Ebervale, I played again at Merthyr, Neath, Swansea, Colwyn Bay, obviously. Really enjoyed it. It's just so much more difficult to do it nowadays because of the schedule, and because we don't play as much cricket. And obviously we've got a fantastic international stadium where we need to play the vast majority of our cricket. So yeah, in many regards it's a shame. You used to love playing on our home outgrounds, but also the likes of Cheltenham and Colchester and Southend and Liverpool, whatever. They were really enjoyable.
Absolutely. And by September in 1997, it was fairly clear that Glamorgan were pressing for the championship title. A crucial game against Essex at Cardiff. I think Tony Cottee, who'd enjoyed a fairly lean season, came good in quite a low-scoring run chase. And then it was down to Somerset. It was down to Taunton. Kent were doing very well. There'd been a drawn game a few weeks before, when we played against Surrey at the Oval. Tragically, of course, it coincided with that time with the death of Princess Diana. I can remember being with you and the rest of the squad in Leicester, hearing the news that morning. The game against Surrey, I seem to remember, was slightly rejigged. Glamorgan drew with Surrey, so Surrey now can't win the county title. We were there. Kent were breathing down our necks. What were your preparations then going down to Somerset like? And again, you knew personally, although I know you hadn't divulged too much, you knew that it was like to be your last game. So how did you prepare for that? How did you prepare for that game?
Yeah, I just on that one. Halfway through the summer, I saw. Well, I was 32, I think, at the time. I'd had 5 operations on my knee at that particular stage. I knew I probably wasn't going to play for as long as some of the other guys, and I was half thinking about my career post cricket. When I saw an advert in one of the newspapers, the England and Wales Cricket Board had just started earlier that year, and Mickey Stewart was technical director of the England and Wales Cricket Board. He was retiring, and I looked at the job description. I said, and yeah, he wanted someone with a sports science degree. He wanted someone who was doing a lot of coaching, which I was in the winter, former player, and kind of, I thought, blimey, that sounds very much like me. So halfway through the summer, I applied for the job. Didn't hear much again for another month or so. Then Mickey actually called me and he said, "I hear you want my job." And he said, "Do you want me to come and have a chat with you?" So we were playing Worcester at Worcester, and he came there, and I sat down with him for a couple of hours. And the job really appealed to me. And literally, we got to Somerset needing to win that game, last game of the season, September the 20th or where it was. And I was due to have the final interview at Lord's the following week. So I didn't know that I was going to retire, but I knew I was down to a shortlist. I was on a shortlist of 5 people. So it was really really important for me because the two things that I wanted to do at the beginning of the 1997 summer, one, I wanted to try and regain my England spot, and although I started off, as you say, I got 233 in the first game and started the season off strongly. I didn't get picked for the first Test match. The selectors decided to go for Mark Butcher. And I knew going for a younger player with Mike Atherton out down the other end and Alex Stewart around as well that I just wasn't going to play. So my one other ambition was to help Glamorgan win the county championship, and I had that one shot last game of the season. I was also one shy of Alan's then hundreds record for Glamorgan. So to end up on the same number of hundreds for Glamorgan as Alan was going to be pretty special if that achieved. And things went well, and I managed to achieve those goals.
It was a gloomy evening at Taunton. I think there were 5 lights on the scoreboard. I can remember having dashed up, I think I'd got permission to not teach the last couple of lessons that day. Whizzed up. I'm thinking, surely they can't be playing in this light. The cars going past the county ground, the headlights were on. And I looked across and I could hear cheering and clapping. And there you were with Matt batting, well, I batting like I've never seen. What was it like to stand at the other end and to watch Matt score that absolutely remarkable? It was 100 without a single run, a single, I should say. The number of fours flying off the middle of the bat. I mean, Hugh, what was it like standing at the other end?
Well, excuse me. Yeah, phenomenal knock. It really was a phenomenal knock. Excuse me. And it was very dark. But yeah, I mean, Taunton's a ground where we really you play some good shots and you get rewarded for it because the pitches are usually good. The outfield's fast, boundaries not particularly long. But even so, I mean, to get to 100 without running in a single and pretty much all in boundaries it was a remarkable effort, and he did it so quickly as well, which is exactly what we wanted because, as you say, Kent were on our tails. We knew they were doing particularly well, and so to take the game away from Somerset at that stage and put real pressure on them was what we needed to do, and it was an absolutely outstanding knock.
And then in Somerset's second innings, a outstanding bowling performance by Darren Thomas, picked up a five for Dean Koska, claims the final wicket, and then Glamorgan need just a dozen or so runs to win. And there you are walking out with Steve James. Just talk me through the emotions that were going through your mind and also through Steve's mind, no doubt, when you were walking out. And again, the hymns and arias, My Hen Lad Van Had I, beginning to echo around the ground at Taunton, and
Yeah.
then the winning runs. Just talk me through that. How did that come about?
I think I was not out. I think Jamie got all the runs actually. It was he Jamie and I had a great rapport. I mean, yeah, he's a good close mate of mine still, and but we didn't speak much at all when we batted together. You know, even when we went in the middle, we didn't say in between overs. We didn't say too much to one another. You know, we obviously wished one another luck, and you know, gave a bit of tip here and there or whatever. But it was more of a nod and a wink and whatever. Even running between the wickets, we had such a good rapport. We very rarely called. We look at one another, know one another's body language really well, and you know we just used to trust one another. So actually walking to the middle, we didn't say too much at all really. He took guard. Andy Caddick was, I think he needed a wicket or two to have 100 wickets or something. There was some milestone that he was after. So he charged him. We only needed 12 to win, but he charged him. I think Jamin nicked one and got dropped or whatever. But yeah, it didn't last very long, and you know he managed to glance one off his legs, and then we absolutely legged it off the pitch as thousands were running on it.
And happy memories, as I said, with a night that still lives long in the memory, a county championship success. If I just mention one personal memory, going up into the Glamorgan scorebox, and dear old Byron Denning, who'd been scoring for Glamorgan for so many years, in floods of tears. And he just turned to me and he said, Andrew, we've done it. We've done it. And we just hugged. And I just remember that. And it just showed what it meant, because obviously Byron, or Dasher, of course, as he was known to one and all, had seen the low times, he'd tasted, or he'd seen the bad times, and here we were tasting the good times.
Dasher was a remarkable man. He was a fantastic character, and much loved within the Glamorgan trade room.
Yeah, and a lovely bit of wit. Christening when we played back in '93, the opening home game of the '93 Sunday League season up at Penturk, and of course at the far end, in the dim and distance, you could see the Bristol Channel, and of course, still known to one and all as the sea end at Penturk, as christened by Byron Denning. Well, Byron had put down your name in the scorebook for the last time, and you retired with 18,520 first-class runs for Glamorgan at a very healthy average of 41. And of course, in that first innings, your 52nd first-class 100 for Glamorgan to equal Alan Jones's club record. Now, we're going to talk about your career with England in a few minutes, but I've got a lot of questions which have come in about your Glamorgan career, and I'd just like to go through these questions with you. I'm not going to give you any half volleys, Hugh. Nothing gentle off the mark. Here we are. Here's my version of a Courtney Walsh snorter. It's from Duncan, who has asked, if you had to choose one overseas player in the Glamorgan team from the time when you were playing, would it be Viv Richards as a batter or Waka Younis as a bowler? There you are. There's your starter for 10.
Oh, that's a really, really difficult one. I'm gonna sit on the fence a bit here because, and I kind of alluded to a little bit before. In 1993, in the early 90s, we needed someone with absolute star quality who was a winner and who could bolster our emerging batting lineup. Viv was absolutely the number one. At that stage, I would have absolutely picked Viv Richards over anybody. In 1997, when that batting team had matured and we were confident that we were more often than not going to score enough runs to put the opposition under pressure, we needed a world-class bowler, and we got a world-class bowler. And at that stage, I would have picked Waka Younis over anybody else. So it depends. It depends on the team and the maturity of the team and where you feel the gaps are. And in 1993, sitting on the fence, I would have picked Viv Richards ahead of anybody. In 1997, I'd have picked Wacky Eunice ahead of anybody.
Brilliant. Paul has asked, what was the greatest innings you watched during your playing career?
Wow. Well, Matthew's knock at Taunton would have absolutely been up there. That's a really hard one. Can I delve out of that and go when I was with England?
Well, the question was greatest things you watched during your career. So,
oh right, okay, no, I can't then. Okay,
well,
okay.
yeah, you can. During your career with England, yeah. What was the greatest things you saw?
Kevin Peterson scoring 100 in Mumbai. We went to Mumbai. We lost the first test in Ahmedabad and then went to Mumbai. And the previous summer, we'd beaten India 4-0 at home on green pitches, and India wanted revenge. And they produced an absolute dust bowl in Mumbai. I went out to the middle to look at it. I promise you, it was like a sandpit. It was like day 7 pitch on day 1. And we lost the toss. And I mean, India had a proper side. Tendulkar, Kohli, Sehwag, the whole shooting match, Dravid. And Swan and Panesar bowled India out for about 180 odd or whatever. And I mean, that looked like 500. It was turning and bouncing. And then we batted, and Peterson went out and got 180 on his own, and he didn't miss a ball. It was just extraordinary, and won the Test match. So that was remarkable. But Matson is at Taunton. Domestically, when I was playing, I can't think of I could think of one other one. Actually, one other one. Viv Richards got 164 down at Southampton.
Yeah.
When we beat Hampshire down there, and we needed 13 off the last over, and Viv hit Malcolm Marshall for 2 6s and a 4 in an over. Extraordinary, no?
Yeah. I did have on my run order notes here just as a prompt. I've got MPM or IVAR. So yeah.
And we didn't even speak about that, did we?
No, great minds think alike. Now, Howell has also asked your finest innings.
It's always nice to get you always go to your highest score, which was the 2-3-3 against Warwick. I'm not sure that was my best innings. Funny enough, when we in what was it, the year we won the championship? I can't remember. We were playing Warwickshire in Cardiff on a pitch. We prepared 2 pitches, which we shouldn't have done, but we did. And we ended up playing on a pitch that if Alan Donald was going to be playing, we were going to be playing on the other one, but he wasn't playing. But Warwickshire still had a good bowling attack. Gladstone Small, Tim Munton, Dermot Reeve, etc. And we played on an absolute green top. And I remember getting 50 or 60 in a very low scoring win. And I got battered left, right, and centre on it. But that was I think that was one of my better knocks.
I would have to say, having seen quite a few of your innings, there was a one day, I think it was a Benson and Hedges game against Canterbury, where we had to win within a certain number of overs. And I've just got memories of your shot over a deep backward square leg and the Kent bowlers disappearing time and again. But it's your memories, obviously, that innings against Warwickshire. But your memories again, Hugh Owen wants to know, who was the greatest character you played with? I've got a funny feeling I know what you're going to say.
Look, I've been, when you spend 42 years in the game, you meet some great people and some great characters. None more so than Stephen Royston Barwick. Basil just kept us. He was just a naturally funny bloke, a real competitor. But he's absolute legend. And even when I go around now to meet people that I played with, in yesteryear, like Neil Fairbrother. Neil Fairbrother was a very, very fine player. And Neil used to hate playing against Basil because he was just so accurate. Oh, I mean, yeah, the stories of Basil are absolutely legend, not just in Glamorgan but around the country. I mean, he was a fantastic bloke who he always kept us on our toes in the dressing room.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say he had a unique training regime as well, and his match preparation may not meet the certain requirements of the strength and conditioning coaches and dietitians and what have you. But if you just judge someone on what they did with the ball, wow! And such a competitor, and it was great actually. Last season, Hugh, I did manage to see Baz in the crowd a couple of times at Cardiff, and it's great to know that he still sits there, still follows the DAF, and what a wonderful character. Now, Peter has asked the most difficult bowler you faced. Now, we've talked a lot about fast bowlers. Obviously, there are spin bowlers and dibbly dobblies as well. But his question says the most difficult bowler you faced and why?
I would say Courtney Walsh was definitely up there in the top 2 or 3. Courtney, as I said earlier on, I played against Courtney from 18 years onwards. I pretty much played him every year. He was a fantastic bowler in terms of he never got injured. Whenever you played against Gloucester, you knew Courtney was going to be in their side. So he never got injured. He bowled forever. He just didn't seem to want a break at all. He could bowl really quick balls when he wanted to, but it was because he was so tall. You know, Courtney must have been 6'6", and as a left-hander, he had an awkward actually angle the ball across you, and I much preferred, unusually actually, I'd much prefer the ball coming into me than going away from me. So Courtney had a couple of weapons in his armory that really made me struggle. So he would definitely be up there as one of the most difficult. In some terms, to think about spinners, I thought Eddie Hemmings was a really good spinner. I mean, he used to play with some very helpful pitches at Trent Bridge where he used to play against him there. But Eddie was, unerringly accurate. Used to spin the ball a lot. Yeah, look, I mean, I think I only played against Warney once, that was just a great experience. But yeah, Courtney Walsh would be up there.
Okay, now there's a nice question here from Robert, who's asked if you had to open the batting for Glamorgan, who would be your opening partner at the other end? Out of all the people you've played with, this could even, I did ask Robert what he meant, and he said, well, if you had to choose someone to go and out to open the batting with, I'm guessing from what you said, Jeff Boycott is not going to be on the list. But if you had to open the batting for Glamorgan, who would it be with?
Look, I was lucky that I opened for quite a long time with a number of different people. The one that I enjoyed batting with most, and I mentioned it earlier on, is Steve James, because I had such a good rapport with him. We were good mates, but he was, and we understood one another's game, and I think our games complemented one another as well. So, he was the person I enjoyed opening the batting with most. If we could open with anybody else in the world, blimey. I'm just trying to think of some of the people that over the years that I've really admired. I mean, I used to love watching Gordon Greenwich bat when I was a kid. Desi Haynes, fantastic player. But I think of the ones that I've opened the batting with, I'd go back to Jamer.
Okay. David wants me to ask you about your favourite ground. I know you might say anywhere where you got 100. Well, there's 52 of them. But if you're going out to bat then with Steve James on which ground? If you had to choose one ground then to go out to play, your most favourite, your dream partner at the other end, where would it be?
Oh, look, Lords is special. You know, when you play there in April and it's freezing cold and there's 25 people sitting in the stands, it's still a very, very special place to play cricket, and I will always that will always hold a very special memory. Um, of some of the other grounds that I've played around the world, Newland's beautiful. Yeah, it's just a stunning location. Really enjoyed playing there. And the other one is obviously the SCG. You know, the history, the tradition, the rivalry. One wonderful place to play cricket as well.
Yeah. Gary's asked, would you like to have played in 2020 cricket?
I would have loved to have played in 23 cricket, actually. Yeah, I would have. You know, I think it would have been a different challenge. You know, the closest that I got to it was obviously playing in 40 over cricket, and then sometimes those games were rain affected, and you would play in shorter games. But yeah, I would have loved it. I think it's look, I mean, it's not everybody's cup of tea, as we all know. But what it is doing, the shorter form of the game, is engaging and encouraging new audiences, younger people to get involved, to get interested, and I think it's a really good thing. And yeah, I'd have loved to have played T20 cricket.
And the 100?
Absolutely, yeah. Look again. You know, the 100 is definitely not everybody's cup of tea, but it is a competition that last year at Sapphire Gardens we got 38,000 people through the gates. For the feedback that we had has been terrific. You know, we're seeing new audiences coming into the game, and anything that will attract new audiences, engage more people in the game of cricket, you know, has got to be a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, just today, uh, back at Sapphire Gardens, we've had two schools in from the Llanrumney area of Cardiff, 81 children having a great time. And over lunch, must have been half a dozen, maybe even 10, coming up and saying, "Sir, do you know when the 100 matches are? When can we come and watch Welsh Fire?" Or another one, a girl came up and said, "Oh, I came with my granddad to watch the Welsh Fire. When are the games?" I mean, it's seeing it through the lens of a child. Fantastic. In the same way, you and I, Hugh, from the same generation, when we used to sit down on a Sunday and watch the Sunday League on television, and to watch a game, and like you said, you'd watch David Gower and Andy Roberts on television, and then in 1981 you're caught Gower bowled Roberts. But I've got one final question for this part of the talk before we move on to your work as an administrator. But Sue has asked, what was the funniest moment in your playing career?
What was the funniest moment? One that immediately springs to mind was a game that we played at Sapphire Gardens against Middlesex. I think it was in 1993, when Mike Gatting went for a run and Matthew found himself at the bowler's end trying to gather the ball to run him out. And Gat managed to flatten not only Matthew but three stumps and end up lying on top of them all. That was very amusing from Gat, I have to say. I mean, there's so many things that happen, you know, in and around the game as well, and after the game, and you know that's where the characters like Steve Barwick just make playing county cricket just so enjoyable. You know, you get very, very close with these people. You spend 6 months of the year with them, and you just go through some really great experiences.
Yeah, I absolutely, and I know again another personal memory of 1997, as well as Byron Denny in tears after writing down Glamorgan have won the championship. I do remember the story, of course, has done the rounds after dinner. Speakers, I think, have dined out on it many times. But Darren Thomas and Merseyview, or it was Merseyview, the evening, rather than going to a place with French cuisine of the highest standard, Merseyview, snails and beef bourguignon or whatever. It was a chain of pub overlooking the Mersey
Yeah,
View.
Darren also came out with an absolute beauty. We were on pre-season tour of Zimbabwe one year, and we were in the middle of nowhere in a place called Kwekwe in Zimbabwe, and the hospitality was unbelievable. It was fantastic, and they put on a hog roast that night, and there was this big pig on the spit, and Anyway, everybody got to help themselves, and Darren cleared his plate quicker than anybody else, and Steve Bart went up to get seconds, and Darren said to him, "Oi, Basil, can you cut some more beef off of that pig, please?"
Legendary, legendary. Let's go back to 1997. Let's go back to October 1997. And you, as you mentioned earlier, Hugh, you joined the ECB as technical coaching director, replacing Mickey Stewart. So, what did you initially do? What was your role right at the very beginning?
So at the beginning, I mean, it changed a lot as the years rattled by. But initially, it was to look after all the junior England programs. So England under 19, under 17, under 15. It was to look after all the coach education programs. So basically, coaching all the coaches in the country and getting them accredited and qualified. And thirdly, to look after all the science and medicine programs that were beginning to emerge. And then there was a project that very quickly came to the top of the agenda, which was setting the National Cricket Academy up.
At Loughborough.
At Loughborough, yeah.
Did you have to do any research and go and look at other countries to see what they were doing?
Yeah, massive, and that was really enjoyable. I mean, I went down to one of the first trips that I went on was down to the Australian Institute of Sport because they were producing all the best cricketers and had done for the last 20 years, and that was pretty much single-handedly down to one man, which was Rod Marsh. And I'd not long been in post, and I wrote to Rod and asked him if I could pop down and spend some time with him, and he came straight back to me, yeah, and he became, I mean, the late great Rod Marsh, sadly departed a couple of years ago. I was absolutely, distraught when he left us because, what a great man he was. He spent a lot of time in his company and managed to persuade him to come back and become the first National Academy director over here. I was absolutely gobsmacked when he said yes, I have to say. And seeing Rod for the first time in an England tracksuit was a sight to behold. So yeah, the research that I did, that was the primary research, so in Australia, but I'd also spent time at the Liverpool Football Academy, which was terrific. We spent time looking at Man United when Sir Alex Ferguson was there. I sent some people over to America to look at some of the top sporting institutes in America. So we try to gather all this kind of best practice from around the world, from different sports. And that's when we started drawing up plans for Loughborough.
And some of the coaches to come through from that system, the likes of Peter Moores, Andy Flower, and you worked with both of them then in your next iteration, for want of a better word, as you moved into much more of a management role with the England and Wales Cricket Board and looking after the England team.
Yeah, that's right. I'd been at the ECB for about 6 or 7 years, I guess, at the time when we'd had a disaster in the Ashes down under in 2005, 2006. And there was a restructuring that went on, and there was the position of managing director of England cricket that was established. I applied for the job, lucky enough to get it, and spent 7 very happy years doing that.
And I know that you also undertook quite a few reviews. There was the Schofield report in 2007. So to then move on to see in 2009 the name Cardiff alongside first Ashes Test. How proud were you to actually see Test cricket finally coming to Wales?
Yeah, I mean, hugely proud. To come back to play the first Test match of that Ashes series in Cardiff was, if you'd have said that to me 10 years previous, I would have said, you're an absolute dreamer. That's just not going to happen. But it was amazing, and 2005 was obviously very special. But 2009 for me, having that game in Cardiff and coming back and being managing director of the England team, it was a very proud thing for me to be able to do. And I think that the way that it was set up and the welcome that everybody had, there were a lot of naysayers, as we all know, leading into that game, and we know the reasons why. But I think the the event that was put on is a remarkable legacy for us, and it's a great credit to everybody involved at the time.
Yeah, and it was one hell of a game as well that went down to the final hour, the last few overs, and perhaps it was the coaching systems that you'd put in place and the batting in particular that just helped Monty Panesar to block out those last 69 balls.
I'd love to say it was, but I'm not so sure. But it was remarkable theatre at the end, that's for sure. I know that.
Now, from the highs of Cardiff in 2009, I know there was the dreadful events in Mumbai in India as well, and there were also quite a few challenges on the political stage as well with Zimbabwe. So, what are your reflections on the challenges that you successfully managed to overcome?
Yeah, it was a remarkable job and a remarkable time, that, because I remember, as you say, it was November the 1st of 2009, but I always remember it was November the 1st. We played a match against a gentleman by the name of Sir Alan Stanford in Antigua, which was always going to be a disaster, and was. So that was the 1st of November. We then flew back into London, spent 48 hours in London, then flew out to Mumbai, and spent 10 days at the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai before we started touring around the country. And on the 25th of November, just 3 weeks after the Stanford debacle, we were playing in a place called Lucknow, One Day International, and we'd lost the game and jumped back on the team bus afterwards, and we were traveling back to the hotel when all the boys' mobile phones started pinging off, which was basically saying there'd been a terrorist attack on the hotel that we'd stayed in Mumbai. And we left a pile of stuff there and all that kind of thing. So anyway, as things unfolded, I mean, it was just horrendous. And we then got locked down in our hotel in Bhubaneswar. We had 8,000 police officers basically cordoning the place off. We had the Indian Black Cats, which are the SAS equivalents, protecting the teams, because we were staying with the Indian teams, and all the officials were in the hotel as well. There was rumours that we were the highest profile Western target in India at the time. And it was a very, very alarming situation. Fortunately, the presidents of the Indian board were staying in the same hotel as me. I was the most senior ECB official at the time, and basically we postponed the tour at that stage. We then flew back to London to get some advice from the Foreign Office. And then spent a couple of days. We flew then back into Abu Dhabi before flying back into India when everything was safe. But it was an extraordinary period and a very, very worrying time for everybody.
And you were fortunate enough then in terms of your right hand men. Was Phil Neal the team manager then, and or helping as the administrator? I know and there was Meda Lord as well, a name people may not be that familiar with as an administrator at Lords.
Yeah, look, I mean, in times like that, you just need some really, really good people around you. And I was so fortunate I was surrounding myself with good people. Peter Morse was the coach, Andy Flowers, the assistant coach. They were absolute rocks. And our head of security at England at the time was a guy called Reg Dickerson, who was a very large Australian unit, who's very, very experienced in anti-terrorism and that world. And he was absolutely outstanding. I mean, the advice that he gave us every step of the way was absolutely spot on. And I couldn't praise Reg enough. He was the person that got us through that.
You also had quite an interesting tour of the West Indies, I think, and an island that my wife and I enjoy going to, St. Lucia and various other places where you had the Pedalo incident with Freddie Flintoff.
Yeah, that was another. That'll be another interesting chapter in my book. It was yeah, it was extraordinary. It was the beginning of the World Cup, so we'd just come back from Australia and a torrid tour of Australia, and went almost straight away to the Caribbean to play in the World Cup. And our first game, I think we lost. I think it was to New Zealand we lost against, which was a disastrous start. We were going to play Canada in the next game. Anyway, that night, some of the players decided that they were going to go out and went into St. Lucia, to Rodney Bay to enjoy themselves. Got caught on mobile phones. Pictures appeared in the newspaper next day. And of course, you know, Fred and the infamous story about him jumping on and falling off a pedalo. I think it was a canoe actually rather than a pedalo. But whatever. He didn't cover himself in glory then, Fred.
No, but on a serious note, I must say how pleasing it was this summer at Cardiff. Life has been quite difficult for Freddie since the horrific crash whilst filming Top Gear. But how nice, Hugh, it was to see Freddie back, and great to see that he's been involved. So much knowledge, so much common sense he can pass on to the aspiring England players.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you know, Freddie was, you know, when he was playing, he was an England icon. And you know, as you said, Andrew, you know, to see him now back up on his feet and fit again and involved in the sport again, you know, I think it's great for him, and I think it's really good for the game too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your time with the ECB came to an end during the summer of 2013. A difficult year again for Glamorgan, a sizable, a mounting debt. We won't go into the reasons behind that, but you faced a whole load of challenges when you came back as Glamorgan chief executive and also a twin role as director of cricket. So returning back to Glamorgan, obviously I know a challenge you relished, and Glamorgan obviously ingrained on your heart. But what were your immediate challenges facing you?
There were three really: finance, finance, and finance. Um, I was look, I kind of approached it with my eyes open, and I knew we had a very large debt. I thought we had a little bit of working capital to work with to change things for the better. Um, but you know, literally the first day I got my feet under the table, I was consumed with this big black financial cloud that was over the club, and that was really stark. It really struck me. I literally came in. Our finance consultant Simon White, who's still with us, he's done a brilliant job, Simon. That's the very first meeting I had with him. He said, "Right, Hugh, that's your budget for 2014," which I looked at and I thought, blimey, how are we going to work with that? And he said, "The first thing you and I have got to do is lose £300,000 off it." So you know, it was a very, very stark beginning, and it's pretty much been 10 years of that since. But in all seriousness, if it wasn't for what we call our friends and family, some people who are, you know, high wealth individuals, but who love the club, who love the game, they basically did a bit of a short-term rescue package before I arrived at the club. And if they wouldn't have got involved at that stage and been so generous in their support of the club at that stage, the club would have gone bust that year. There's no doubt about that. I mean, literally, we had conversations into that year about how we were going to pay the staff. You know, it was that worrying, that serious. So it was all about finance and getting that right, because otherwise we wouldn't have had a cricket club. So we, led by Barry Bryan, the chair at the time. Barry was absolutely fantastic. We had some very sensitive and difficult discussions with some of our creditors. The upshot was, and this took 2.5 years, 3 years to finalise, but we managed to write down our debt by 70%. We were approached by the ECB about international cricket. and it was agreed that if we weren't going to apply for test matches for a period of time, then they would write down some debt even further. So the long and the short of it, over the last 10 years, pretty much, we've reduced our debt from 17 long-term debt from 17 million to about 1.7, and we have a plan to reduce that further going forward, or at least the club has. So I think financial stability was absolutely crucial. That's not to say that we're flush with cash at the moment. It's going to be a really tough 2024. But we're not the only ones in that boat. I know a lot of other counties at the moment are struggling for finances. So it's a tough. There's a tough period for the sport. It's a tough period for the sector of sport. I mean, we've seen what's happening in Premier Rugby clubs. So we're just gonna. If you haven't got financial stability in any business, you're going to struggle, and that was the first thing we had to focus on.
And around about 2017, I think 2018, talk of a new competition, talk of the 100, and as we mentioned earlier on, and I mentioned just today with the children from Llanrumney coming in, the evolution of the 100. The creation of the Welsh Fire men's team, Welsh Fire women's team, and for Cardiff to be home to one of the 8 initial franchises, as the 100 evolves, that of course so important that Cardiff is one of the staging venues.
It's critically important to the lifeblood of the club. I mean, I don't think people realise that 25% of our income at the moment comes from the 100. It's that important financially, but much more than that. And as I alluded to earlier on, it's about trying to engage new audiences. As I said, last year we got 38,000 people in for our spectators in for our 4 home games for Welsh Fire. So average nearly 10,000 a game. 69% of those people had not been to Fire Gardens before, so it's a brand new audience. It's a much younger audience. It's a much more diverse audience. And that's got to be good for the game. I mean, look, I, like pretty much everybody else on this call, have been brought up on the longer forms of the game. Championship cricket, I love Championship cricket. That's what I did. But I think we've got to be realistic here. When it brings in when this new competition brings in that much revenue, and they're talking about selling franchises off and selling the competition off for the thick end of £1 billion. I mean, that is an absolute game changer for the sport. But as I say, it's more than money. It's about engaging new audiences, and that is just so important for the sustainability of cricket in Wales.
Yeah, and nurturing the grassroots, very much in the same way that we said about the Glamorgan team under your captaincy in 1993 that won the Sunday League, and again under Matt's captaincy in 97. Many of those players brought up in the Glamorgan Colts team. But I think, Hugh, the other thing for me personally, which has been a game changer, is women's cricket. It remiss of me not to mention how nice it was to see Amy Rees receive a fantastic national award recently for all the hard work she's done. But to see, just in the course of the last 4 or 5 years, the way in which the women's game has completely changed, and quite rightly so. And some of the best games for me last year were the games Tammy Beaumont leading from the front, brilliant 100 at Cardiff. And I'm sure you agree that for the women's game, the 100 has been a massive sea level change.
Oh, incredible. I mean, I was very proud of one of the things I was responsible for in my early days at ECB was integrating the Women's Cricket Association into the ECB, and seeing the game change. That was about 2000. The way the women and girls game has changed since then is just remarkable. And it's just been so exciting to see. And as you say, Tammy Beaumont, she was her knock last summer, for those who saw it, was brilliant. I mean, she was. She's an outstanding individual. I think they've got some great role models in the women's game. It's something that I think we should be really proud of, really get behind, and properly going forward. Integrate women and girls cricket into everything that we do at Glamorgan County Cricket, which we are doing at the moment.
I know there's lots of reviews and there's lots of consultation going on. I pick up the broadsheets in the morning. There's probably something devoted. A lot of it may be speculation, a lot of it may be rumor. But how how do you see things evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, there is definitely a shift from red ball cricket to white ball cricket, and that's been happening for a while. Um, there is the players. I think it's an amazing time to be a player. Um, at the moment, the choices that they've got, I think, are remarkable, and I think for the administrators of the game, that's got to be a concern as well. And the players have got to be taken, with the game, because otherwise, you can see them disappearing and playing in domestic leagues around the world and not playing international cricket and all that kind of thing. So it's there are some really, really tough decisions to be made. Um, I think some fantastic opportunities as well, I have to say. And it's really important that Glamorgan is at the forefront of that. That's why I pushed personally really, really hard to have 100 franchise in Cardiff, not just develop the women's game, the men's game, but the women's game as well. There is an opportunity coming up in 2024 to develop the women's game even further, with a new domestic structure coming in place. I think it's really important that Glamorgan are at the forefront of that too. So yeah, it's a really, really changing time in cricket, a real changing landscape.
And on the international front, 2020 cricket in the Olympics, leagues and franchises in North America, the old traditional map of cricket playing countries being ripped up. I read with great delight to see that Uganda had qualified for the next major ICC tournament. Again, your thoughts on cricket in the Olympics?
I've always been a supporter, going back a long time, and there were those at UCB who were dead against it. They were really worried it impinge upon, our test matches in the summer, international program in the summer. And yet, yes, it will. But if we're to truly globalise as a game, being in the Olympics is critically important. I mean, you look at Russian tennis, for example. Before 1980, before it became an Olympic sport, you couldn't name one Russian tennis player. Now you can name lots and lots of Russian tennis players over the last 30 or 40 years. And that's because what happens, as soon as you become an Olympic sport, the government pumps money into that sport. So there's a whole pile of governments who haven't taken any notice of cricket at all. But now it's become an Olympic sport, that really could begin to globalise it. And, there's more interest in America. There's certainly some interest in China. India is just, a behemoth. I mean, it's just massive there, obviously. But there are other places that I think the cricket will expand.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say about cricket in the Olympics. And as a former pupil of Blundell School, you may remember this from your days in big school or on big field, going in the pavilion at Blundell School, because in the year 1900 in the Paris Olympics, a team called the Devon and Somerset Wanderers, who represented England, beat France in the final. And the Devon and Somerset Wanderers were, in fact, full of old Blundellians. So there we are.
Yeah, 1900 is a bit before my time, Jorger.
Yeah, I know banners. I know. Ah, banners. Now, a question here. Why from Howell? I think everyone knows I'm called Chalker because scoring, and that's what you do, chalking up the runs. But banners, Hugh, your nickname, which has stuck with you since the early 1980s. Come on.
Yeah, it's a real bizarre one, this one. I mean, some nicknames just thrown out there and they stick for some reason. So in the early 1980s, some people might remember there was a detective program on television called Banachek. And George Peppard was the star of that show. And George Peppard had blonde hair and very short, spiky hair. And one year I came back in my foolhardy youth with spiky hair for pre-season, just like George Peppard. So they call me Banachek or Banners, and it's kind of stuck. It's one of those things that's just stuck.
Yeah, yeah. And I suppose it could have been George Clooney, but anyway, that
I
um
wish.
the I think I know the answer to this, but Howell has also asked, what's been the biggest change you've seen in the world of cricket in your 45 years associated with the game? Not just Glamorgan, but what do you think has been the biggest change?
Um, Army. I mean, the growth of women's cricket is one thing that's changed massively for the
Yeah.
better. Um,
What about technology?
oh right, okay, yeah. Well, helmets. Well, I'm glad I had one of those when I started the career, because I regularly got clonked on those. And you mentioned about Alan Donald hitting me. So yeah, I mean that. I when I started my career, helmets were just coming in, and I'm just so thankful that they did. That was really important. There's lots of things that have moved forward. Fielding is at a completely different level from when I started the game. Some of the catches and the boundary fielding now is just remarkable. Um, Interestingly, and I think it's probably because the amount of cricket that's played around the world, I don't think fast bowling has come on as much as it could have done. Certainly, there just seemed to be a lot more fast bowlers around when I played. Particularly the West Indian fast bowlers.
Mm.
But you look at Imran Khan, Garth Roof from South Africa. A lot of the Aussie fast bowlers. So, but yeah, I mean, I think fitness, athleticism, and fielding would probably be where it's changed most.
Yeah, and the conditioning and people looking after their bodies, the S&C. What about technology and umpiring? I mean, I was so proud, although I have to admit, I was watching the World Cup final while sat on a very nice Cunard liner inside the Arctic Circle, just off the port of Tromsø. Luckily, in the cabin we were able to watch Star TV with Australia v India. But I actually, as a member of the officiating team, so proud to see two of our home umpires, Richard Illingworth and Richard Kettleborough, officiating at such a high standard and getting things right. Gone are the days, I guess, on the county circuit, certainly, of retired or players going into umpiring and, well, we won't name names, but we can probably remember some. But the level of officiating now, we've got match referees, the way in which pitches are produced. Would you say that there's much more of a professional approach to professional cricket?
I think this is a more technological approach to cricket. I still think some of the umpires that I was fortunate in my era to play with were outstanding umpires that would have been outstanding nowadays as well.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, they've now got technology to help them. Maybe that would have helped us in 1993 with that game
But it
against
definitely
us.
helped us in 1993.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a question from Peter, who's asking about private equity and the pros and cons of new external cash for the 100. And you did allude to this a few minutes ago with rugby, which has had its fingers burnt. And Peter said, can cricket learn from some of the things that didn't go well with rugby, moving into the private equity market?
I think there are definitely lessons to be learned from moving into. I mean, I think it's a really exciting opportunity, and there are different equity models that ECB can look at. ECB own the 100 competition, so it's in their domain. But I mean, obviously, the first class counties and the first class county chairman have a really important say in all of that. So I think it's a huge opportunity. I think there's a lot of thought that's going into it. I mean, I'm just about to finish, but I know that there is a meeting coming up very shortly on this very subject that ECB is leading a workshop on for all counties. So I think that there is definitely a need to be more informed about it, and definitely some lessons to be learned. But it's potentially a huge opportunity for the game as well.
Yeah, and it's great to see some of the numbers, and if the benefits which have trickled down as far as the 100 is concerned, if those benefits keep coming, then Glamorgan County Cricket Club is going to be in a very, very healthy position. Jane has got an interesting question. It is the last question, though, for the evening, from which has been submitted. Jane has asked, are you a left-hander in all of your sports?
Good question, Jane. No, I'm naturally right-handed. So when I was a kid, first putting the bat in my hand, I used to have my hands the wrong way around with a cricket bat. So rather than changing my hands around, my father turned me around, so that my right hand was at the top, and I naturally started batting left-handed. So I'm a left-handed batter. I play golf left-handed, but squash, tennis, writing, everything else right-handed.
Right. And just in term, again, James sent another question coming in. If you had to say, did you model yourself on another left-hander? I mean, you alluded to David Gower earlier, but was there a left-hander that you admired when you were growing up? Or was it just a batter, whether they were left-handed or right-handed? It didn't matter.
Yeah, a little bit of both, really. I mean, certainly Alan Jones. I
Yeah,
watched Alan, but I mean, Viv Richards was the other one, because as I was growing up through the 70s, he was obviously coming through, and he had an unbelievable summer in 76, and so yeah, mate, as a left-hander, mainly Alan Jones.
yeah. Okay. Well, the last thing I'd just like you briefly to talk on, Hugh, is your charity and your fundraising walk. We all know that life has not been the easiest for you, not only in the last couple of years, but earlier on when you fought off cancer in your throat. You were very proud to receive in the Queen's Birthday Awards a couple of years ago an MBE, and it was for your cricket and your charitable work, your fundraising work. Let's finish off just by talking about the good that you've done outside cricket. We've obviously been fascinated to hear about your career as an administrator, but for other people facing challenges, you've also led from the front in the same way that you led from the front with the bat in hand. So just tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with throat cancer when I was 38 years of age, and I remember sitting in front of my consultants there, a guy called brilliant bloke by the name of Rowan Corbridge, and I'd had 30 sessions of radiotherapy, 4 operations actually, and it had been a pretty miserable time. And anyway, after a year of post-treatment, and he said that things were looking much more promising and whatever. I said to him, kind of, why me? I was 38 years of age, because he said the typical profile of someone with throat cancer at a particular stage was somebody who smoked a lot, who drank a lot, and was probably into their 70s. And I said, I'm 38 years of age. I like it. I like a glass of red wine, but nothing stupid. And I never smoked in my life before. Kind of why me? And he said, we don't know, but we're setting up a charity, and looking to do some research into it. 8,000 people a year get this disease. There's no NHS budget for research into it at the moment, and we want to investigate it more. I said, well, how can I help? And that's when we started this Heads Up charity that we started. So I was lucky enough when working with ECB to know some individuals who I thought might help, approach them, and they very generously donated some money. I did the London Marathon once, I hasten to add, and never again. But we raised thick end of £400,000 at that particular stage, which was all 20 odd years ago now. and that money paid to set up a research laboratory at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. And I'm pleased to say the charity's gone from strength to strength. It's now merged with a much bigger charity and it's got much bigger resources, which they're ploughing into head and neck cancer research. So that's something that's been close to my heart for a long time. And obviously, with my more recent diagnosis, I haven't done anything as of yet. But I think when I've got a bit more time next year, when I do finish at Glamorgan, that's something that I'd like to help with as well.
And your wife and your two daughters, I know, were very proud to see you receive your award from, well, it was Prince Charles, wasn't it? Or was it the Queen who handed it over?
He was the king. He became
He
the
was
king
the
at that
king.
stage.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. It was a very proud and humbling moment. I've got to say, it was a huge surprise when I received the letter, and it was a wonderful day that we had at Windsor Castle.
yeah. But it had been the Queen who'd nominated. It was on
Yeah,
the Queen's last list.
it was literally the Queen's final birthday on this list. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Hugh, we wish you all the very best in the coming months. As you alluded to, you're in the middle of a course of treatment. I must say, you're looking well, you're sounding well. For the last 2 hours, you've reminisced well, and we wish you all the very best in the coming months. You've had a lifetime in cricket spanning 45 years, and we all look forward to seeing you enjoy the fruits of your labours at Sophia Gardens next year and the year after, and for many, many more years. You will. I know that there'll be a rush of people coming up and wanting to talk to you. And thank you so much for what you've done. So, on behalf of everyone associated with Glamorgan County Cricket Club, thank you, Hugh, for everything that you've done for the Welsh club, both on and off the field. And happy Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Much appreciated. And look, I'd just like to thank everybody for their support, not just in the last 10 years whilst I've been back at the moment, for the last 42 2 years. I mean, the club's been very close to my heart for a very, very long time. So thank you for the support that I've had on a personal level. Thank you for the support of Glamorgan. Look forward to seeing you in the future, sitting in the stands and the seats. And wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Hugh. And this is the final talk of the calendar year 2023. So I'd like to thank all of the speakers who've contributed. Of course, in more recent times, Colin Ingram and Otis Gibson since the end of last season. And we will be listening after Christmas. The dates will be appearing fairly soon. We'll be listening to Chris Cook. 2024, of course, is a very big year for him with a testimonial year. And I'm delighted to say that Tim van der Gooten will also be speaking to us before the season. The one thing, Hugh, I do know that we say, certainly here at Hicknall Towers, when it gets to Christmas, we're halfway through the winter and the cricket season is just around the corner. Of course, we've got the shortest day coming up, and the cricket season will soon be here, and we'll be hearing the sound of leather on willow. So on behalf of everyone this evening, once again, many thanks to Hugh, and Nadolig Llawyn a blwyddyn newydd dda.